the sun comes out, there will be a ray of sunshine here. And I kind of need the sunlight to show you what I want to show you. But in the meantime, while we wait for the sun to peek out of the clouds, I'll tell you a story. So I sold something on Craigslist, and this guy came to pick it up. And I'm kind of a country bumpkin now. So when he came here, he wanted to nose around my homestead and swap stories about his old house, old farmhouse, and all of his problems. And he was quite talkative, and we got to talking about different wood varieties. And he was trying to impress me by, look, I might be using a little bit of comedic effect here to make him sound worse than he was. He was an alright guy, but he wanted to brag about his old house and his woodwork, because they don't do it like they used to, right? Well, he had what he called tiger maple all through his house, and I tried to tell him that tiger maple isn't exactly a variety of wood. It's not like a species of tree, and he just wasn't hearing it. And his closing statement was that, well, that's not what they said at the lumber store, and I'm going to go with what they said. Well, you can go whichever way you want, Chief, but the fact is that tiger maple is a slang term for what is known as quarter-sawn. And I'll explain real quickly to you what quarter-sawn wood is. In the most literal sense, a quarter is 1/4. It's if you cut this way and this way, you'll have 4 quarters. And that's exactly what the term comes from. It's specifically referring to a type of cut that the person who's milling the wood makes. Now, here in my firewood pile, I found a really good example of it, and so I used that to turn it into something nice for Mrs. Pocket. I don't know what type of wood variety this is. It's incidental, but it's beautiful. So you can discuss amongst yourselves. I have suspicions, but I don't want to state what they are for fear of being incorrect on the internet. Here's another piece of it, whatever it is, and here's an even better example. So in this piece, look at the grain rings. Let me get you a better shot. The sunlight still isn't quite peeking out, but we can still see if we look. Notice how this is 1/4. If you imagine that the center of the log would be here, and this would be the outside of the log. Now, if you make a cut such that it moves through the grain in that way, and it exposes all of the concentric rings, that's what quarter-sawn is. And it reveals the design when it's cut that way. Finally, there's our sunlight, and it's overpowering. So, when you cut it this way, it reveals this amazing depth. Its optical quality is almost holographic. Sometimes this property is referred to as chatoyance. It's cat's eye. Now look what happens when you give it a finish. This was a letter opener. It's just a junky letter opener that had significance to Mrs. Pocket. And I dipped it in some poly. And now I'll give you a close-up of what it looks like. There we go. I've finally managed to capture it in a light that does it justice. I had to turn the exposure down because the camera sees the light as the sunlight as blinding, but that definitely captures it. I'm also kind of obligated to mention that what we're looking at here in the woodworking world is called figure. So there are a million varieties of wood, and there are a million ways to cut each of those million varieties, and there are a million other variables that can alter what we're looking at. For example, This strange growth that you can sometimes find on a tree is called a burl, and it's caused by any number of different infections that cause... Okay, wait, back up. Wood is... It's an organic... I don't want to say substance. It's an organic material, and as such, it's built by mathematical guidelines that create this type of algorithm that define how it should grow. Now, any number of weird environmental stressors can cause what would normally be a simple repeating pattern to go haywire and do something weird. In this case, like in a burl, what is normally predictable grain does something absolutely goofy. So if you cut this thing apart, you'll get strange figuring. So what we really decide to call this doesn't matter. The important point that I was trying to make was simply that just because a certain variety of wood is called a certain thing, that doesn't mean that you're just going to be able to rip into any old piece of it and get that. To be able to exploit this property, to be able to exploit this figure in a wood, requires some skill, or trial and error in my case.